good afternoon, folks, and welcome to another Flycast Partners presentation. I am Rich Longo, as always, and today's presentation is on Ivanti Device Control for our virtual lunch and learn today, and it's being presented by Ivanti's very own Michael Brooks. Michael's been with Ivanti for quite some time now and has extensive knowledge about this product and many others. I'm going to keep this introduction brief so we can get right into it. We have a lot of attendees today. We want to be able to take questions at the end. So I want to remind you, please type your questions. Actually, not even at the end. We'll take questions throughout. So if you type your questions in the questions section of this GoToWebinar application, I'll read them off for him to answer throughout our presentation. Before we get started, let me introduce Flycast Partners. Flycast Partners offers best-in-class implementation services and training in IT service management, IT asset management, IT operations management, enterprise service management, and workload automation spaces using ITIL best practice. Our professional services team has well over 5,500 professional service engagements on site and remote. Remember that remote part, that's pretty important in the COVID situation we're living in today. And as an organization, Flycast Partners has over 1,100 regular customers throughout all of Canada and the United States. I encourage you to reach out to us directly at 844-FLYCAST, that's 844-359-2278, or visit our website. We have folks standing by during normal business hours, Monday through Friday. They would love to help you out and chat with you. That's what that little green box is in the bottom right-hand corner. I would like to encourage you once again to please type in your questions throughout this presentation. I will read those off to Michael and he'll answer as many as time will allow for throughout today's presentation. So don't forget to type those questions, type them in at any time, and I'll read them off for you. With that being said, Michael, I'm turning this over to you. I have just handed the reins over to you, sir.
Excellent. So let me just begin by, thanking Flycast for having me on. Go through this presentation about device control. And let me introduce myself. My name is Michael Brooks. I'm a sales engineer here at Ivanti. I've been with Ivanti going on 11 years, and that entire time I've been working on the different security solutions here at Ivanti. This just happens to be one of those security solutions, in this case, device control, that I'll be presenting to you today. Now, as we go through this demonstration, the agenda for today is what you see on the screen, endpoint security challenges. I'll talk a little bit about and try to set the stage for, why device control is something that, organizations need, or not only need, but need to gain visibility and to meet regulations and things of that sort. I'm going to talk a little bit about, what solution are we talking about today? We probably already know that because it was in the title. Why people might look at this solution, then we're going to jump right into the solution and we're going to take a live look, and I'm going to go through some use cases with it. Let's begin. So what are some of those endpoint security challenges? Now, this shouldn't really be anything new to everyone in this webinar today. We all know that malware is growing at a very, high volume. And why am I focusing on malware? Because I'm going to be focusing on things that you can plug into computers. Malware doesn't just come from email. It also can be put onto a USB stick. As you can see, as time has gone by, malware has become more sophisticated, ransomware, targeted malware. And then, of course, it's become, like I mentioned, very sophisticated. I just received a piece of malware yesterday from my father-in-law. And I knew it was malware and had an attachment that had a virus in it. So just knowing when you see things will give you that edge. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today because of the different attack vectors. Now, the primary attack vector we'll be talking about today, as you can see, is rogue USB sticks. But not just rogue USB sticks. These can be issued USB sticks. Virus, malware, and then browser, OS. They all have different vulnerabilities. So we do have a total defense in depth solution that not only has device control, but it also has patching of all operating systems. So all Windows operating systems and all non-Windows operating systems. So that's your Red Hat, that's your CentOS, that's your SUSE Linux, that's your Oracle Linux, your AIX, and so on. And what's really nice is that a lot of the solutions today are they're just very complex, and because there's so many consoles, databases, and agents, what we're going to be talking about a little bit today is being able to manage devices and all I/O ports that are plugged into a computer. Now, what solution are we talking about today? So the solution we're talking about today is the Ivanti Device Control. We call it here IDAC for short. We all love acronyms. And we just released version 5.2 at the very beginning of the month. This particular solution's been around for over 20 years. So it's a very, it's a solution that's been developed, over that entire time. The area we're going to talk about is endpoint security, basically computers and protecting the I/O ports. An I/O port, you'll see exactly what that is when I get into the live demonstration. We'll be talking about device control today. What's cool about the products, you can gain visibility in who is connecting what, when, and where. Get very granular data on that. What else is kind of cool about this product? It does bidirectional shadowing. What is bidirectional shadowing? It gives you the ability to take a complete forensic copy of what's being copied on or off. Not only what's being copied on or off, but if someone's printing. So we can take a complete forensic copy of what's being printed. Furthermore, if you allow your users to do CD, DVD, we can also take a complete forensic copy of that. Copy limits. Maybe you have folks in different departments in your organization that need copy limits, or maybe you're using copy limits for a trigger event, and we'll talk more about trigger events. But what I mean by that is, let's say someone's copying over a gig a day. Maybe you're going to want to create a trigger event based on that. Keyloggers, file filtering. Literally, if you want your users not to be able to transfer data, but you want them to be able to look at MP3s, or you want them to be able to look at PDF, things like that, you're able to make those exceptions. AD integration, meaning we integrate with Active Directory. You're able to apply a rule to a group of users in Active Directory and to a user in Active Directory. And again, whatever permissions you apply to a user will always override what permissions you apply to that group. So it makes it very easy to manage through exception. And then finally, SIM integration. Not only syslog, but we integrate with Splunk and other SIM technology. Now, what I always like to do is I like to show these. Now, most folks will say, I always ask, what do all these different devices have in common? And I probably should add more than just USB sticks here, because that's what they look like, USB sticks mostly. But the key here is that what all these devices have in common is that they all require requests to the OS for physical access through an I/O port to gain access using that device driver, plug and play type devices. And that's a lot of what we'll be talking about today. We want to be able to make your users still productive without, but also, walk that fine line of security. Now, device control at a glance. So of course, we'll be focusing on certain device use cases today. The one that's easiest always to understand is US removable media and other peripheral devices pose the largest threat in your environment. So one could be, of course, insider malicious theft, and I'll talk about that as I go through my live demonstration, and then insider accidental loss. And that's where encryption comes into play, where a lot of regulations and things of this sort require USB sticks to be encrypted. So that is an added bonus of using our technologies to be able to apply encryption. With Ivanti, what can you do? Again, one of the biggest areas of using our technology in most organizations, they have no idea what's being plugged into a computer. So you're going to gain that visibility. Who's connecting, what's connecting, where it's connecting, when it's connecting. You're going to be able to see what data is coming into as well as out of your organization. Remember, we are talking about removable storage. We're talking about I/O ports, not data in motion. You'll be able to quickly set policies, controls with devices that can be connected, and what level of access that you can give to these. And then you can enforce encryption. So this could be encryption where you purchase a bunch of encrypted USB sticks, or you buy unencrypted USB sticks, and you use our technology to do the encryption. And then at that point, from most regulations, are requiring that data to be encrypted, and we'll be able to do that. Now, some of the unique features, which I kind of touched on a little bit at the very beginning, is the bidirectional shadowing, being able to take that complete forensic copy of what's being copied on or off, the copy limits, key loggers, and file filtering. Now, finally, this is the last slide that I have. I'm going to talk a little bit about why people might look at the solution. Now, I'm going to do this throughout the entire demonstration, but I wanted there to be just one slide, and really the first two are the only two I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to move on to the live demonstration. One of the main reasons, pretty much predominantly the main reason, is because of compliance, regulations, and failed security audits. So those are the primary reasons why folks need something to control the different I/O ports in an organization. Some organizations may even be blocking USB or blocking some of these I/O ports using group policy, but then can't report to an auditor that they are doing that. And that, again, is one of the things that we're able to provide our reports that do prove that, yes, we are compliant. We are doing what you're asking us to do. And then, of course, a trigger event. And I'll talk a lot about trigger events because device control is all about trigger events. Snowden, for instance, when he took his data off a USB stick, we'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about bidirectional shadowing. And then, of course, the last one I will mention is it's a very simple approach, very simple to define policy. In most organizations, using the technology is extraordinarily simple. What takes most of the time is determining what policies you have in your organization. Now, what I'll do is I'll jump right into the live demonstration. All right, so where am I going to start? I always like to start with the end in mind, because when it comes to device control, when it comes to a lot of solutions, it all comes down to auditing. Remember, I had mentioned the main reason why folks use this technology is because of regulations, because of compliance, because of an audit. So with that being in mind, because as a CIO or somebody that's in charge of security, something like that, it's not as important as to how you get there. It's that you're actually doing it. So here's just some of the reports that we have. Now, these aren't the reports out of the box in the technology. When I show you those reports, you're going to see a very robust, if not one of the most robust reporting tools out of the box that you've seen. But this is an added bonus to the technology. This is our extraction tool that Ivanti provides. Now, this is very much like any reporting tool, but it integrates with all the Ivanti products. But not only can it integrate with all the Ivanti products, what you're looking at is something that can integrate with any technology that has a back-end SQL database, a back-end MySQL database, or an Oracle database. And at that point, these are all live reports that you can create. Now, this is just one that I'm going to show you, which is device control over the last year. It gets pretty granular, as you can see, the date, the names of the endpoints, who the users are, what device class, and even what the action that was taken. You can drill into these different reports. With the last one I'm going to show you, just so that you can see it, is just another report, device control summary. These are what our device classes, as you can see. And then we have pretty different graphs and things like that. So I just wanted for you to see at the very beginning, if you are a manager or if you're someone that's just interested in the raw data or the data being moved around and where you're at, we have these types of reports. And again, you can combine these types of these dashboards. So if you have other technologies like SolarWinds, things like that, we already have connectors that are built in to get that information directly to you. Now, at this point, I'm just going to jump out of here and select OK there. And I'm going to just reconnect to my remote session. Just 1 second. Let me just do that really quickly. There we go. All right. And first, let's just jump right into it. So first, again, this is an agent server technology. You can see that I'm on R2. We do support the newest versions of Windows. My backend is SQL Express, but of course we do recommend using SQL. Now the agent can be ran over SSL over TLS, which is a tunneling protocol. So we are able to be extraordinarily secure from that perspective. And within the technology, we have our own client deployment tool. Now, does that mean that you need to use our tool to deploy the client? The answer is no. You can use Configuration Manager or any other software deployment tool. But you can use our tool directly to deploy the client. Now, at that point, I'm just going to log into the interface, and everyone should be fairly familiar with what this looks like. This looks just like Device Manager within Windows. Now, folks are probably saying, well, this looks like an old interface. Well, it is slightly an older looking interface, but here's the key. It does exactly what we claim it does. So you're right, maybe it's not the prettiest interface, but the key is that what we advertise, and we all use a lot of different types of products, this does exactly what we claim it does. Now, what you're looking at again is what we call all the different I/O ports. So you can see biometric devices, you can see Citrix, you can see serial, DVD, floppy, imaging devices. So someone had asked earlier about imaging devices or printers. Are you able to do bi-directional shadowing with printers? The answer is absolutely. You can do that. The key here is that whatever device class you select, if it has the option to add shadow, that means, well, of course, we support the ability to do that, take that forensic copy. That being said, this is a default deny solution. So what's that mean? Well, that means that of course you're going to test. Of course you're going to figure out what policies you're going to have before you deploy, to your users. But here's the key. The key is that off the bat, you're going to be blocking folks. So that means that anyone that should not have access to using their USB, you don't have to do anything because out of the box, it's going to block them. Now, at that point, you're going to be managing through exception because once you figure out the different policies, you may have different exceptions in your organization. What you can do is you can apply policy to three different areas. The first is the top level of a device class, removable storage, CD, DVD, printers. This is what we call the top level device class. Then, if you want, you can then apply permissions to a type of stick, a make, Kingston sticks, SanDisk sticks. And then finally, in my organization, the way that I do it is that I issue approved USB sticks. And I'm going to talk a lot about different use cases when I get into the live piece of the demonstration about, how you can approve things and things of that sort. But then finally, after being able to apply to a device class, removable storage, or a type of stick or a category of approved sticks, you can even apply permissions to a unique ID. Every USB stick, just like a MAC address or other devices, CD, DVDs, things like this, have a unique ID. So you can be extraordinarily granular when it comes to applying permissions. Now, let's talk about permissions a little bit. And what you're going to notice is that just how simple it is to manage this. Now, first, you can apply a permission that will generically apply to that user if they're online or offline. This technology never needs internet connectivity. You don't need internet connectivity when you install it, and you don't need internet connectivity when you deploy it. Now, that being said, you could have permissions that are different when they're connected, and you can have different permissions when they're not connected. Let's say when they're at home, working from their home office, things like that. Now, at that point, how can you apply permissions? You can apply permissions, like I mentioned, to a user or a group of users in Active Directory. Okay, so we do integrate with Active Directory. Now, we don't write to Active Directory. We don't extend Active Directory in any way. We are able to apply permissions to Active Directory. You can not only give the ability to read, but you can give the ability to read and write. You can only give them the ability to read. You can give the ability to encrypt. Now, encrypt means that you're going to take an unencrypted USB stick and encrypt it. This can be done either by your support team or it can be done by your users. Say someone comes into your office, maybe it's a contractor. They plug their USB stick. You don't have any policies around them just bringing a USB stick in this case. You plug it into a computer, and at that point, maybe your policy is that, well, you don't care if that user, that contractor, uses that USB stick, but it has to be encrypted. And that is going to be one of the examples that I show in my live demonstration. And then finally, decrypt. Decrypt does not mean that you can decrypt an encrypted stick. It means that you can remove the encryption from an encrypted stick. And then finally, we're talking about software encryption. We are not doing hardware encryption in this particular case. Now, one added ability is file filtering. So you can say, for instance, maybe on certain types of file types or whatever it may happen to be, it doesn't make a difference. This is up to your organization and what different policies that you have, executables, things like that, where you can allow import but not export, and so on. But the key here again is that you have the ability to do file filtering. You even have some limited DLP functionalities with our technology. Now, that being said, I'm going to hit cancel here. I'm then going to right click again, and I'm going to talk about scheduled permissions. You can also schedule permissions. So if you have a kiosk, or if you have a user, or if you have a, whatever it may happen to be, you could add scheduled permissions. So I'm just going to select anybody because it doesn't make a difference. Just to show you, I can give them just read. I'll do read and write. Select next. I can schedule maybe Monday through Friday from this time to that time. Things like that. So you can become very granular as to how you apply these permissions. As I start going down, we have the ability to do what we call shadowing or bi-directional shadowing. This gives you that ability again to decide, of course, the device classes, I'm going to use the bus type, which is USB and non-hard drive, because how do we know what a device is when it connects to the system? Well, remember that picture I showed you where I asked, what do all these different devices have in common? Well, what they all have in common is that they report themselves to the OS. They declare themselves, I am a removable storage device. Well, we're just leveraging that. We're not reinventing the wheel when it comes to that. So when a device is plugged into a computer, it declares itself as a device, and at that point, we manage that device. And this is where you can now decide, well, do I just want the metadata, who it is, where it was, everything but the forensic copy? So maybe on the read, on the right, I enable where I take a complete forensic copy. Whereas on the read, well, I'm just going to get the metadata, who did that, when they did that, where it was, things like that, file name, and so on. And then I hit next, and then of course I can, like before, I can apply that to a user or a group of users in Active Directory. So you're noticing one thing, is how granular you can be. It makes it very easy to manage via exception, and that's the key, is to manage through exception. Now, we have the ability for copy limits. If I add copy limits, and just to talk through copy limits a little bit, maybe I'm going to do 10, 24. So I always like to talk about copy limits, from the perspective of people taking data that are internal folks. So one of the biggest, the primary biggest issue when it comes to data theft is the insider. Sure, there's people that are hacking into your environment and grabbing data, out of your databases and things like that. But like, for instance, like a Snowden type of a activity was an insider. Now, what I always would like to say is that, I don't know what copy limits that they have in place, but if I even put 10 gigs, we know he took more. I at least would have started getting reports that said someone was taking 10 gigs Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Maybe that's a trigger event for me to turn on bi-directional shadowing. So maybe I wasn't going to stop this malicious person from taking the data, but as we know, information is power. So by knowing all the data that was taken, that gives me the power to be able to deal with whatever happens moving forward, because I now know what can be released or what can be sent out. Now, from a regulations perspective, if you're a financial institution, if you're any type of an institution that is regulated, which is pretty much, any company that's publicly traded to, or some privately held, you're going to want to be able to at least be proactive as to knowing what was taken. So this is one of those things that was saying, like, maybe someone in accounting for the past week has taken a gig of data. Maybe I want to turn on bidirectional shadowing, things like that. Let me hit cancel here. Now, there's a lot of different use cases that I can go over, but from the perspective of using the technology, literally, that's how simple it is to use this technology. The very next step is for me to go through some live examples. Now, before I go through those live examples, Rich, are there any questions I should answer before I move through a live example?
Not as of yet, but folks, go ahead. We're standing by for your questions. No, there's no new questions.
All right, great. So let's talk a little bit about some of my use cases. This is the very first use case. The very first use case that I have. Now, mine are going to be some combinations of use cases. So the very first use case I have is, I don't really care if someone brings in a USB stick, but no matter what they take off that USB stick, I'm gonna take a complete forensic copy of what's being copied on or off that USB stick. So I'm gonna pop a USB stick in, and before I did this, of course, I tested all this. So let's I don't have my fingers crossed, but let's see how this works. So in this particular case, I even have a custom notification. You must encrypt. All right. Now, I usually have a combination of permissions in place, which you'll see next. The combination of permissions I have are, if you plug in an unencrypted USB device, you don't have access to it. But in this particular example, I gave myself access because I'm going to show bidirectional shadowing. So I did not encrypt this stick. This is an unencrypted stick. Maybe, your policy is that you have to encrypt, but remember, you can combine the permissions together. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to open up one of these. I called it top secret 8/4/2020. Let's open that one up, and let me just add something to it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to save that. Save. Okay, I'm going to get out of that. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm also going to change the date, just, for the sake of argument. I'm going to move that to a 5. So we know that it's a complete different. And then I'm going to take that, I'm going to put it on my desktop. All right. So we're going to come back to that. I was allowed. And what I'm going to show you when I come back to it, because I have my logging set for a 5-minute duration, I'll come back to it at the end. So the key here is that this was an allowed stick, although in reality, this should be encrypted. You should not allow someone to use an unencrypted USB stick in your environment. So I'm going to select no here. I'm going to take that USB stick out now, and I'm going to plug another USB stick in. What is the use case that I'm going to use now? The use case that we're going to talk about today on the next example is, I do not let anyone in my environment, I don't care who they are, with an unencrypted USB stick. Okay, so I'm going to plug a different USB stick in. Come on, here. Sorry guys, there we go. And I'm plugged in. And it says you've been denied access, because remember, this time I'm doing something different. What I'm doing this time is that I will not give myself access to this stick if I don't encrypt it. So if I select no here, and I have all these custom pop-up messages, you don't have to have this, but for demonstration purposes, it's kind of fun just to see some of this pop up. I'm going to go into my desktop. There it is, and I have 0 access because I don't allow any user in my environment to use a stick that's unencrypted, except for the one that I showed you initially. All right, so now I'm going to leave this USB stick in there. I'm just going to leave that one in there, and I'm going to plug in another actually, I'm going to just pop this one out. And I'm going to plug in another USB stick, and I'm going to talk about the different types of encryption that we have. So I'm going to plug this one in. And what's presented to me? It's presented to me to unlock this USB stick. So here at Ivanti, we offer 2 types of encryption. We offer what's called decentralized encryption, which is what you're looking at, and I'll talk more about that. And we offer what's called centralized encryption. So let's first talk about decentralized encryption. Decentralized encryption is, you can decide how many chances you have. I have 5 attempts here. You can decide on how complex, you can meet your organization's complexity rules, whatever it may happen to be. And you could, of course, do password recovery. So if this was legitimate and I screwed up 5 times, I could regain access to this particular stick, right? Now, if I drop the stick in the parking lot and someone then picks it up, we'll have 5 chances. But because I'm using very complex password structure, uppercase, lowercase, things like that, well, they're not going to get that in 5 tries, unless they're, so magical that, that it's just, magic. But that being said, they're going to have to reformat that entire stick. But of course, if it's legitimate, they can gain access to it. So let me gain access to it because, well, I know the password. Oh, let me try that one more time.
We have a moment. We have a couple questions.
Perfect. Let me just talk a little bit about what centralized encryption is, and this is the actual file. Centralized encryption would mean that you have to have an agent on that endpoint. So with decentralized, I can take that to my Mac at home. I can take that to my Starbucks or whatever it is, and I have to put in a password. But with centralized encryption, I have to have an agent installed. Not only do I have to have an agent, you have your PKI infrastructure, because we're going to use your corporate certificate. So your corporate certificate for access to this USB stick. So again, you have to have a very good PKI infrastructure for that part to work. And at that point, it could be even, when I log in with my username and password through AD and pop my stick in, it could even be transparent authentication directly into that USB stick based off my Active Directory credentials. But again, you have to have access and you have to have an agent. What are some of those questions? Why don't we hit those?
Okay, first question comes from Steven. Steven wants to know, what is the performance hit to the client device, both resources and network bandwidth?
Got it. So, I never tell anyone to take my word for it. I would love for you to, test drive it, but almost none, pretty much 0, because it's not doing anything on the endpoint. It's almost an inactive agent on the endpoint. So it produces less than 1% CPU utilization when you're actually accessing something. So from your perspective, it's almost non-existent. Now,
another question.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go.
No, I'm ready.
Okay.
No,
next
I'm ready.
Question. Alberto wants to know, where are forensic copies stored and how are they secured?
Really good question. So there's a directory within the technology when you install it, or after you install it. You can just come in and go to your tools, default options, and we have a directory. Now remember, when it comes to this directory, you can't even just go to this directory because it's encrypted. So it's an encrypted directory. But I recommend, making sure that you have the proper storage device for this content. A SAN, a NAS, because remember, if you have 100 users and they all download a gig a day or less, you can understand how quickly that can build. So usually when it comes to bidirectional shadowing, there has to be a trigger event. Now, I do work with a lot of 3-letter organizations and a lot of government organizations, and they do bidirectional shadowing continuously. But again, from a storage perspective, they have terabytes, petabytes of storage. But yes, you can either configure that at the beginning, or you can come in here and configure it at a later date where that's located, that storage directory. And it is encrypted again. Any other questions?
Yes. Next one is Jay wants to know, are those copies backed up automatically?
Are they backed up automatically? So wherever that storage directory is where that they're being stored. So depending on how you're managing wherever that storage directory would be, would depend on how often it's being backed up. I think I answered the question. I'm not sure. All right. So the next example, which is my last example, then I'll move right into reports and we can take more questions, is the next example is, in my environment, unless you're authorized, you don't have access. So you have to be authorized. I have customers where a contractor comes into their office. There's a process, let's say that they need to use a USB stick. They plug it in, maybe it checks for viruses, and then it automatically applies some sort of a policy, maybe encryption or whatever may happen to be. And then that particular organization gives them a contractor's login. At that point, they can go to any computer, log in with that contractor's login, and as long as there's an agent on that endpoint, that policy will then travel with that contractor no matter where they're at. If they're at a kiosk, of course, you can have a policy just for that kiosk or for that particular computer, and that contractor or that person just coming in can then use that computer in the same way. Now, this is a contractor coming in or a user coming in and just plugging in a USB stick. And in this particular example, we issue those USB sticks. We don't allow anyone to use an unauthorized USB stick. So let me pop this one in. And I have pop-ups, of course. You know, you're going to see all these little pop-ups. I'm going to try to gain access to it, and I'm denied access. All right. Now, all these permissions can be combined, interchanged, and stacked, things like that, and so on. But that being said, the very next step is going to be for me to talk a little about logs. Now, logging. This particular technology, and I've been doing this for almost 20 years, has one of the most robust, out-of-the-box reporting tools I've ever worked with. It can go to a syslog or to a SIM, of course, but this is directly built within it. So, for instance, I have something called Everything Today. Well, I never modify the already existing ones, but I create or I clone the other ones. So for instance, I have one here called, I use my own initials, Everything Today, for instance. You give it a name, it could be Everything Today, whatever it may happen to be. I'm going to do my shadow one today, because that's the next example I'm going to talk about. I can give it a name so that, you know, it's something specific. I can make it private, I can share it, I can publish it. And then all the granular filtering that I have. So for instance, I'm only going to talk about a few of these because you can see there's just a list of the amount of information that we gather with this technology. So first, what type of an action? So if I come over here and I can start seeing all these different other types of actions. I mean, honestly, until I started working with this product, I didn't even know that a computer actually records some of these types of actions. Now, from a trace on, everyone talks about, you know, well, how easy is it for me to go back in time or, you know, create custom reports? It's extraordinarily easy. I can just come into any report, go to the traced on, and I can start from a certain date, today, last month, whatever it may happen to be. It makes no difference. The key here is that we make it so simple for you to look at current data or, you know, future data. Hit cancel there. A file name. Maybe I'm looking for something very specific. Attachment. Maybe I'm looking for something only with attachment, things like that. Size, who the user is. I can look for specific users. I can look for specific computers, specific device classes, specific model IDs. I'm not going to go any further. You can see that it becomes extraordinarily granular when it comes to managing this. Furthermore, scheduling it. It's all in a simple little window. Now, you're still probably saying, well, this looks kind of like, you know, an older version, but this has been around for over 20 years. And what's the key? It actually does what we say it does. And that's the key. Now, you can schedule, you know, whatever the date is. Wrong button. You can share it. You can email it, whatever you want to do. Now, file, you know, the format, HTML, XML, CSV, but here's the key. Monthly, weekly, daily, hourly. I mean, the amount of reporting that you can gain from this is, you know, just enormous. The visibility that you gain is just enormous. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this report. I'll execute this one right here, and let's see what we get out of this report. So I did this earlier. If everyone notices, I named it 8/4/2020, but I renamed it to 8/5/2020, just so that we know that I'm actually looking at something different. At that point, it tells me the date, what was granted, what wasn't. You get all the metadata, as you can see, but you can see the metadata here. But here's the key here. Let me just make sure that I don't have anything on my, here it is on my desktop. I'm going to delete this and remove it from my recycle bin. And we can go in, nothing's there. Come back to device control, select save as, put it on my desktop, and then I'm gonna come back. Now remember, I made some edits to that. I put 1, 2, 3 or whatever I did. I don't remember what I did. And here it is, top secret 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this could be a PDF device. This could be anything. I just use a text document because it's quick and easy, and I don't have PDF reader on this computer. It's something that I don't put on my servers. Now, that being said, that's just one very small report. If I just come in here and I do something like everything today and I execute that, we're going to get some information in just a few moments. Let me query this. And here we go. Now, here's the key. You don't have to have all this information. As I showed you earlier, if I come into the template and I go in here, I can start removing or unchecking these boxes to make it a less cluttered report. If you have it automatically going into a SIM, maybe you're only checking certain types of trigger events or actions that take place, things like that. I'm going to hit cancel here. I'm going to hit cancel here. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to end my presentation and see what questions that we have and what final questions that we have.
Okay, a question we have now is, how long does the training usually take to be able to use this Ivanti solution?
So I generally, I can train somebody within an hour on how to use this solution because it is extraordinarily simple to actually use. What's going to take more time is to determine what policies an organization wants to put in place. That's what takes most of the time. But it doesn't take more than an hour. If you want to be, if that's unbelievable, that it takes an hour, let's say it takes 4 hours if that's more believable. But like I said, I've been working on the product for almost 20 years. And in most cases, I train people within an hour, come back within 3 days to do follow-up questions. And within a week, if not less, they're pretty much power users. Now, does that mean that you're deploying this into your environment within that week or two? The answer is no. You do want to have it in learning mode for a while at the very beginning in a dev environment. Then, of course, you find a small group of users, an Active Directory group, of course, because, again, you're going to be managing through exception. But in this case, you'll use an Active Directory group. And then you'll slowly roll that into production. The key here is that if someone needs access and they're not connected, you can give them temporary access to that device or device class. So there are many ways to gain access to devices that are being blocked. I hope that answered the question.
Another question from someone else: is there any prerequisite required for the training? Can I put in a junior analyst and he would be able to get the concept quickly?
Absolutely, that person should be able to get the concepts quickly. I would say that you can get someone that doesn't know much of anything about technology. All they need to understand is what read and write is. As long as they understand what a read is, meaning I can open a document and read a document, write a document, I can make a change to that document, a modification to that document. At that point, we've already level set their abilities. And then from there, it's just taking concepts like the word encryption or the word copy limits, and then putting those in place. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, and everybody's very happy with your answers, and the general consensus is that everybody enjoyed your presentation. They very much so did. There's some folks that do want some additional information. I'd like more information on training, 1 hour in today's recording. Finally, thank you for today's webinar. Very informative. It was formatted in a way that was easy for us to follow. A lot of great comments like that, just so you know. A lot of people liked your presentation overall. Folks, those of you that are wanting a recording, I will have that recording ready by Thursday and released by Thursday. We'll get that to you. Anyone who attended will get that copy. I know a lot of you are asking for this. You want to rewatch it. You want to share it with your staff. We appreciate your comments on a great presentation. I know that he worked very hard to make this work despite his network issue, and it's very good to see you guys that appreciated it. So thank you so much, folks. Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And everyone be safe and have a good day.
All right, folks, have a great day. Stay safe out there. And like I said, we will get that recording out.